All right, so we're talking about intelligence today. Fantastic, good times. Main subparts of this unit or of intelligence is like, what is it? And then how do we measure it? So first things first, we got to talk about two forms of intelligence. And I feel like these terms actually popped up in the very beginning of this course. Like it was on a Quizlet, but I don't address it until now because I think it makes sense now and not later. And that is fluid intelligence versus crystallized intelligence. So crystallized intelligence is all of your knowledge that you accumulate through your entire life. From everything that you've gone through, to every book you've read, to every class you've taken, all the words that you know. You know, older people, they do know more because they live longer. They've experienced more things. And so their crystallized intelligence is much higher than yours because they've been around the block once or twice before. So when it comes to crystallized intelligence, this goes up with age. An older person has more of it than you do, which is different than fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is how quickly you can process information. It's going to be being able to think abstractly and outside the box. And that actually tends to decrease, but it decreases in later adulthood. I'm not talking about 50s, I'm talking about like 70s and 80s, like later adulthood. So while an older person might know more than you, they might have trouble accessing that information and like telling you about it, but they do know more. But if they feel like, when grandma starts talking about stuff, you're like, oh, grandma, because it takes her a while to spit things out. Yeah, her fluid intelligence is lower, so it might be slower for her to say the thing, but she definitely knows more than you think she does. So when they talk about like people that make like a breakthrough in their field, the breakthrough often comes out in different ages. So poets, historians, authors, they typically those things require a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience in their life. Making a really good book or something, and not a new novel like that usually comes out later on in life. So people that are authors, poets, they make their big contribution later on in life because they need a lot of crystallized intelligence. But scientists, mathematicians, engineers, they typically make a breakthrough because that requires a lot of fluid intelligence. They make their breakthroughs in their 20s and 30s. It's when they're really making their breakthrough discovery because it takes a lot of abstract thought, and that does go down with age. All right, speaking of testing, you guys just took a test. You guys took an aptitude test this week, most of you. The SAT, or really the ACT, a lot of standardized tests, not all standardized tests, but a lot of standardized tests that you guys take to get into college, even IQ tests or GT tests, are going to be aptitude tests. This is designed to see if someone can learn. Not have they learned, but can they learn? So it's designed to predict about people's success in the future. It's supposed to, at least. Those of you that took the SAT this week, were there some things on that test that you have not been taught? Yes, that's the whole point. The whole point is to give you things that you have not been taught to see if you can figure it out, to see if you have enough like critical thinking skills to figure it out. But if you're like, this is unfair, we haven't learned this, that's the point of the test. That's the point of the test. That's different than, let's say, an AP test or a unit test or any vocab quiz you've ever had is a test to see, have you learned? Not can you learn, but have you actually learned the material? That's different. That is where is it? Do I have it? Yeah. That's an achievement test. Have you achieved AP psychology? The AP test will find out. Have you achieved US history? The EOC will find out. Have you learned Unit 9? Your test will find out. And so this is like, have you learned the material? Most tests you've ever taken have been achievement tests. Every single unit test, little daily grade quiz, they have been achievement tests, not aptitude tests. I'm erasing. Do I need to have a sip of water, or are you slow? Sip of water? Sip of water. Here I go. I am moving on. I'm going fast because I want to get through some stuff today, so it can be less to on Monday. All right. If you are given an intelligence test, which is an aptitude test, one of the most famous IQ tests that's given often is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. I doubt anyone here has taken it. If you have taken an IQ test, it's probably the kid version of this. So switch the A to a C, and that's the kid version of that. That'd be Wechsler Children Intelligence Scale or Child Intelligence Scale. But it comes in like, I mean, it's not like you can take this online. There's a test proctor. You go to a testing center. There's different, like there's moldable things. Like there's manipulative little things that you can like take these squares and make this shape. But they also have a whole bunch of different subtests. There's 11. How many subtests are there on the ACT or the SAT? 4. It's like English, math. Yeah, but like 2 different types of.
It's reading, writing,
and then math calculator, math no calculator. But then ACT has science. So there's one more. One math. But then they like just replace it with science.
But then for the ACT, you can also take like a writing portion.
But isn't there writing on SAT?
But the writing
portion,
it's like
revision
grammar.
No,
like
but
you get
there's
an essay,
optional essay. And then it's like what needs to be changed in this sentence, like grammar writing.
Oh.
On the ACT, you have to like, write an essay.
Got it. There's a prompt versus like editing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Who wants to do the edit? Like.
The editing's actually really easy.
Yeah, it's really easy.
Okay. Yeah, but it seems like at this point, shouldn't you know what grammar is? Oh, whatever. Okay. Anywho, that seems more like have you learned versus like can you learn? Maybe I don't know. I'm not gonna get into that. But so when you have a test broken out into subtests, unit tests, testing class are probably not like this. They're probably not broken down into little sections. The AP test, sure, there's a multiple choice and there's a writing section, but they're not broken down into different skills. Those are the same skills throughout the whole test. But when you have subtests, you have like maybe move these blocks to make this picture, or sky is to cloud as blank is to blank. Those types of things. And when you have subtests, you are using factor analysis. Factor analysis can determine like which of the subtests are like strong for a person. Wow, they really excelled in this part of the test versus like weak. Because of what I teach, I'm usually left alone. No one really cares how I do. But if I was to teach U.S. history, a U.S. history team meets like several times a week, and they really, really break down every single test that they, not AP, not DC. I'm talking about on the whole. Every single question is teaked. Like here is the teak that we are required to cover by the state of Texas. Here is the test that determines that. They actually mark them on like the test itself. So when you're taking it, we know 13 people missed teak 13B. And so they kind of actually use some tests to figure out which of the teaks they need to like reinforce or review or go over, and which teaks are doing really well. And so like I think U.S. history does this, but not really. I don't do that. I don't like teak my test because what I teach doesn't have any teaks. And so I don't have guidelines by the state of Texas of what I should teach. My guidelines come from the College Board, which is a paragraph long for the entire course. But like most tests are going to have, most IQ tests and standardized tests are going to have some sort of format like this. Okay, here's an example question. Don't shut up the answer. And I'm going to give you some time. An example question on the WAIS. You have to figure out which of those 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 goes in that blank. Let's see if you guys are crafty. Smart chip. Okay. If you think you know the answer, show me with your fingers. All right, you guys did a pretty good job. It is number 2. All right, so those of you that are like, well, how? Okay, so these scales balance. So circle knocks out circle, square knocks out square. So what's left is the star. Star must be equal to 2 triangles, and here's 2 triangles right here. It doesn't matter that they're upside down. Triangle is a triangle is a triangle. So look at you guys, so smart. I used to give IQ tests in class to my AP Psych students. No, not anymore. I got tired of the tears. I have access to IQ scores, IQ tests, if you would like to see them. But you know, I got every year someone would cry, every year, and it just got to be worse when it just turned out to be like all the guys crying, because it's like, oh, I'm awkward, and so there's always one kid that thinks they're a genius. It turns out not to be. All right, let's talk about a good test. Everyone in here has taken good tests and bad tests. Testing should, if it's a good test, should meet 3 criteria. Most tests you take are not considered good tests because a good test would be standardized. A standardized test. So what a standardized test is, yes, the EOC is standardized, the AP test is standardized, the SAT is standardized. But what that means is scores that are gotten for that test are always compared to a pre-tested group. That's what makes it standardized. That's why it's harder and harder every single year to get masters on the EOC. Because every single year, the teachers just get a little bit better. They know how to teach it a little bit better, which means the scores are always going up. And the score that is required to pass is always based off the last year's kids. And so if you have one like school year where everyone was super, super smart, the next school year, passing and masters is all based off last year's test, which is really funny because the very first test, do y'all remember? No, probably not. Do y'all know what was before STAR, before the EOC? It was the tax test. Or tax test. I'm so old, I took the TOS test. It doesn't matter, they're all the same. Except the TOS test was ridiculous. It was like, which of the following is a circle? And it was like a triangle, a star, a circle, and the moon. Okay, so the very first year that the EOC came about, they had to have it pre-tested against somebody. They had to figure out like the base average, like how do people do on this test. So the year before it was out, they gave the test to that year's seniors. The seniors did not have to pass the test to graduate. That test was not graded for them. They just were giving it to them as like a base point. So how do you think those seniors did? Terrible. It wasn't graded. It wasn't required to pass to graduate. It was like kids literally, because there was zero motivation to do it. We didn't even give them stickers for doing it. We just said, take this test. It's not worth anything. People put C all the way down, and then they slept for the next 4 hours. So the year after, the grades were based off of that first tested group. So the very first year that we had the EOC test, to pass, just to pass, you needed a 40%. To get masters, you needed like a 50%. Everyone got masters, and we're all like, we're the best teachers ever. But it's like, it was based off the pre-tested group. And so when you have, like last year, I don't know, I wonder if the AP test based the curve last year off of COVID year. I wonder if they just probably were like, forget COVID year, let's go. But it's just harder and harder every year to get masters. Of course, I mean, we have the highest EOC scores in the area, so not for Tom Ball. Yeah. All right, so a standardized test will always give you a normal distribution, always. That's what makes it standardized, is not only is it a pre-tested group, they are going to give you this nice little bell curve. If you came to tutoring a few days ago, we worked out the percentages that are must-know percentages So we have that, +1, +2, +3 standard deviations, -1, -2, -3. 68% of people fall between one standard deviation from the mean and any normal curve. Obviously, our test next week over all of this is not going to be a standardized test. I'm not testing your grades based off of last year's kids. I'm not. And so we will not have a normal bell curve. Or it might be skewed one way or another. It might just be a little wonky. But standardized tests, AP tests, get this grade. SATs, get that nice little shape of scores. Okay. But that's one way that the test should be good. It also should be reliable. Meaning you get the same score no matter what. No matter how I test you, if it's a good test, you should get the same score. Whether it's all multiple choice, all matching, 50-50, free response. Scores should be consistent. What's it? Last year or this year? It might be last semester. Was there some point where your history teachers threw away a test and everyone had to take the test again? That must have been last year. Okay. Oh yeah, because it was. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I think last year something happened on a test. The test got out at some point, and so these U.S. history kids last year, they took a test, and then by the end of the day, by the middle of the day, the test was out. Somehow the test was out, and so the teachers were like, okay, fine, we'll let these kids take the test. Tomorrow, though, they get a brand new test. And so it was a brand new test, covered the same content, but it was a brand new test. And it was like, if you did so well the first day, you should be fine the second day, honestly. And that's true. If it's a good test, obviously, scores did go down because this time the test wasn't out. But a good test should have test, retest reliability. Same thing with split half. If you have, the first half of the test should be as difficult as the second half of the test. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes the second half of the test is much harder than the first half of the test. And I apologize for that. I'm so sorry. But grades are okay. Grades are okay. They've been fine. Sorry. Okay. And then there's different versions, meaning like version A, version B. And that actually took me up to learn a lesson one time. A few years ago, I would make tests, the A test, and then I press the scramble button on my little test generator, and it would spit out test B, which is fine. But for whatever reason, test B was getting significantly lower scores than test A. Like a good 5 to 7 points average difference, which is it's huge. Maybe 1 point, maybe, but not 5 to 7. I was like, what the heck is happening? It's the same test. What are these B kids, just dumber kids? And then I looked at the test and I sat down. I was like, test A is in order that I taught it. It was like these are the order. Like the very first questions came from the very first bit of the unit. The last questions came from the last thing we just did. And so it was like what we naturally learned it in. But test B, I was scrambling the whole test. Test questions and test answer choices were all scrambled, which means test B was exhausting kids because they were going from like, okay, this concept, and then now we're back over here, and now a question over this, and then back over here. And so test B, while it was the same test, the way it was scrambled was making that test exhaustive for the kids, and they were just doing worse on it because of that. So now I just scramble my answer choices. So there should not really be any difference, and I haven't seen a difference really, between test A and test B, because the questions are the same. It's just the answer choices are scrambled. Test should be valid, meaning it tests what it's supposed to test. The content should be valid. You should not have AP US history questions on your AP psychology test. Have you ever had a test though where they pulled out questions like that they didn't even cover? Yes. What? It's not a test today. I was like,
No, we have a quiz, but is there stuff we need to do? He's like, oh, you'll be fine.
oh, is it about the future in history?
Yeah.
Because I know that But it's like
2008, so like we should know it. But
True.
At the same time, it's like
he was talking about that this morning. He's like, yeah, in first and second period, I got all the way to like 9/11 in history, and by the end of the day, I stopped at Clinton because whatever. And then I was like, okay. But maybe also you have some tests where the teacher asks questions about themselves
Mr. Taylor's.
on the test. Are those questions for a grade? No, they used to be though. They used to be until some like kid went home to mommy and like. But yeah, he used to take him for a grade. But he was like, anything that I say is fair game.
Yeah, he says anything on physics.
Yeah. And he's like, anything that I've ever said in class, it should be fair game if you're really listening. But I think some parents are like, so tests should have construct validity. What that means is it should look like a test. It should look like a test. Have you ever had a major grade that you didn't even know that was a major grade until after the fact? Was that a fair test of your knowledge? No. No, it wasn't. If I was to be like, oh, by the way, that quiz that we took yesterday, it was a major grade. Sorry, that is not okay. That is not okay. We had a physics teacher a few years back. Doesn't work here anymore. But a physics teacher a few years back just forgot to plan lessons for the week before the AP test. This was AP physics. Just didn't plan anything. And so he's like, okay, guys, we're going to go outside and we're going to toss a football to each other. And then we're going to record like how physics happens, which is a good lesson. But for 5 days in a row, for the full class period, just throwing footballs back and forth. And so some of the seniors and juniors who had other AP tests to study for, by Wednesday, they're like, I'm not going to toss another football around again. So they sat down in the shade and they were working on like review material. But by the end of the week, that guy, he was like, oh crap, we're supposed to have another major grade this 9 weeks. So that football thing was a major grade and it was participation. So all those kids failed. Because all of a sudden, it was participation. He doesn't work here anymore. It should have predictive validity. Meaning, if it's supposed to predict your future, like aptitude tests are supposed to do, it's supposed to predict how well you're going to do. And if it doesn't predict it well, then it does not have predictive validity. So it should. So this mainly has to do with aptitude tests. A student I had a few years ago, Jake. A student I had a few years ago, he top 10% of the graduating class. I went to the top 10% breakfast with him. He's a good kid. Almost got a perfect score on the SAT. Went to Colorado School of Mines to be an engineering student. Very, very intelligent. Dropped out after the first month. This should have predicted his success in school. That's the whole point of the SAT, was to predict. He got like 4s and 5s in all of his AP tests. So he had all this college credit. Dropped out after 1 month because school was not for him. So I think he went into construction or something, which is no shame. But like that just shows you that the SAT for him did not have predictive validity, because it should have predicted his success based on his scores. He should have been very successful at taking like school and test stuff. It's not like he's not going to be successful in life, but it's just the test did not do what it's supposed to have done. Okay. So when you have a good test, like an IQ test, the data actually means something. You can learn from that. And we've learned this. The Flynn effect. IQ scores are rising and have been for decades. The average is still 100. We'll talk about why here in a second. The average on an IQ test is still 100. It was 100 now. It was 150 years ago. But what 100 IQ can do and knows is so much more today than the past. So while the average person's still 100 IQ, what 100 can do and the information that 100 can process is so much more now than it used to be. you guys have access to information unlike any time before in history. If you guys have a question, you can look it up within a second. I just be happy with that. When I was in high school, if you had a question, you either knew it or you didn't. There was no like internet to like look it up. Google did not exist, and so it's like you would ask, "Hey, do you remember the actor's name in that movie?" No. Okay. And it either came to you later or it didn't. And so there was no like looking things up. You guys have so much information at your fingertips that no wonder you guys are smarter than kids my age back then and like your parents at your age. You are. They have more crystallized intelligence, but you guys are catching up. You're catching up. All right, let's talk about the origins of intelligence testing. First guy, Binet, French guy, Alfred Binet. So where did all these IQ tests come from? Started with him. So he worked for the French government in 1904, and the French government would say, "Hey, Binet, I need you to make a test that identifies which kids are falling behind." Enter the problem with IQ testing. It identifies kids. It doesn't explain why they're falling behind. It doesn't help give solutions to how to bring them back up. It doesn't see the problems with testing in general. All it does is labeling kids. And you guys kind of did that as well. How many of you guys took GT tests at some point in your life? Okay. That right there is a label. I didn't say which one of you passed. I just said which one. Okay. But this is just labeling kids. And that's okay. So sometimes when you label kids and you put like a little label on it, what is that? What could that do? I'm thinking of the term in psych. Self-fulfilling. You are so smart, and we're going to label you as smart. And you are not smart, and we're going to label you as not smart. You did not make the GT program, and you do. And then it's just like, I am not smart enough. Why try? Versus like, I am smart and I can do this, and it sells them with self-efficacy of like, I can do this. And so this, the whole like, you guys are going to go to graduation, and you will see kids walk across the stage that you've never seen before in your entire life. Like you will like, I've never seen that kid ever, and they will say the same thing about you because you were put in the APDC track and they were not. And it's like you are not going to cross. You're not going to like cross your paths ever because you were labeled at a young age and then you got on this track. So started with him, and he said that we all develop at the same rate. There's some maybe not so much. But he came up with the term mental age. A mental age is based on the idea that all children follow the same developmental path. All 5-year-olds can do this. All 7-year-olds can do this. All 10-year-olds can do this. I mean, think about what grade you're in. Why are you in that grade? Solely based on your age. 100% based on your age. Has nothing to do with your work ethic, with your creativity, with your passion, with your motivation, what you're going to do later on in life, if you're ready to be in the grade that you're in. None of that. It has everything to do with the sperm and the eggs were fused. That is 100% why you are in the grade that you're in. It's like there's been thoughts of like, we should not just keep kids like, oh, you're a junior, therefore you must be able to do this math problem. Or you're a senior, you must be able to do physics now. Adam?
So what about the kids that got held back?
Yeah, but that's such a small percentage. And whose decision is that to hold them back? Is that the child's decision? Do they have control over their own educational future? Or was that the parent's decision? Parent's decision. But you know what's crazy? Because of COVID, so many kids got held back, but not for academic reasons. Does anyone know why people are intentionally holding their children back, especially in the state of Texas? Sports. So they will be the big kid in class, and they're more likely to make the team. They say a lot of boys nowadays are entering kindergarten not as 5-year-olds anymore, but as 6-year-olds, so they can be the biggest on the team. Oh God. So, like, that's what we're making our choices on, so they can be like, I'm a little red cat. Like, I don't know. Maybe socialization or education should be primary versus sports. I mean, you have more chance of being struck by lightning than making it. Okay, Louis Terman, he Americanizes the test. That's his big contribution. He turns that French IQ test and he copies and pastes it, translates English. But he was working for Stanford at the time, so he kind of did an homage to the test, or an homage to Stanford and Binet at the same time. So no one really uses Albert Binet's original test. The test now is a Stanford Binet test. So there's like two big IQ tests, the WAIS and the Stanford Binet. And then this guy comes out later, William Stern. He actually adds the number to it. The number that we recognize as IQ is brought to you by William Stern. So this is how they calculate IQ. They take your mental age, they divide it by your chronological age, and they multiply that by 100. What you should do versus like your actual birthday age times 100. And the reason that the average is 100, I'm sure you can figure this out. Let's say you're a 10-year-old that has the thinking capacity of what we believe a 10-year-old should be able to do. So not only are they 10, they think they're average. They think like a 10-year-old. That is why the average IQ is 100. Because that person is doing exactly what they should be doing for their chronological age. Does anyone see a flaw with this IQ, a formula structure? Carson?
Like, 2-year-old would have the same IQ as like someone. If it was average, it would have the same IQ as a 25-year-old, right?
Wait.
So like 25 divided by 25 would be 1, and then times 100 would be 100.
Yeah.
2 divided by 2 is 1 times 100.
No, but they say that IQ is stable throughout your life. So like that would be just that 2-year-old is probably going to grow up to be the 25-year-old that thinks like 25-year-old. But close in terms of like age being a problem here.
Mental age not being like a normal thing.
Okay, there's that. But I'm actually talking about the structure of the formula. Okay, I'll give you a hint. I'm 37, but I think like an 85-year-old. I'm a genius. An 85-year-old's processing speed is definitely slower than someone that's my age. Maybe that's not a good thing to think like an 85-year-old. And so this really only works with kids. This only really works with kids. Because if I'm a 57-year-old that thinks and processes like a 90-year-old, that is not a genius. That is not a genius. And remember, this is a standardized test, which means that around 2/3, 68%. It's not 66%, so 2/3 would be, but that 68% of somewhere falls between one standard deviation. So this is 85 to 115. That is one standard deviation around the mean. The mean being 100, the average. And that is I don't do IQ testing class anymore, because there's always like the 1 or 2 kids are like, I was tested as a child and I had a 120, and I test them again and they're all like, I got a 105. And I'm like, hey, you're average. Tears, immediate tears. And then there's the kid, oh God forbid, there's the kid that's like, they're all like, I got an 85, I got a B. I'm like, only an 85 would think that's a B. So they're like below average, and that's mortifying because you see it on like the screen and it's like you're below average, and then you get the kid around you that's like, and I've been commenting off of you this whole time, and so yeah, there we don't do IQ tests in here anymore because well, just
So if it's stable like throughout like your lifetime, why did it change for that kid? Why did he took a new test?
because he took a real standardized test that was given. It was like a GT test given by a proctor. I got a rinky-dink like IQ test booklet from. I mean, it was from Mensa, so like. What are these? Oh, where's my Mensa book? Do you know what Mensa is? It's an organization of smart people. Like it's an organization. Like you have to qualify to be in Mensa. You have to take Mensa tests, and it's an organization full of geniuses. That's like literally what they do. They get together and they become their geniuses. So it's a whole bunch of test questions, and I've got several in a different book. This is really old, but mine was not a standardized test. Number one, and number two, he took it in a classroom. And when it should be like in a nice proctor, you're not going to do the same. And so of course he did worse. Plus, I mean, you can lower your IQ. You get car accident, bonk. Drugs, bonk. Concussions. Wear a helmet. Don't play football or boxing. And so yeah, those will lower your IQ. But raising them, I'm sure you could take tests and practice and keep active and like read and stuff. That might raise it, but you're not going to go from an 85 to a 120. You might be within a 5-point range by doing those things, but you're not going to be like, I'm a genius overnight. Like I couldn't tie my shoes and now I'm a Mensa. No. All right. Last thing for today. Is intelligence one thing or several things? Well, it depends on who you ask. Depends on who you ask. Do I have it? No. So there's one guy, Charles Spearman. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of names that you're about to know. Spearman, spear. He has one tool, one weapon. So what does he think? Intelligence is one thing. It's G. It's G. G stands for general intelligence. Either you have it or you don't. And he would point to IQ testing. That's what IQ testing shows. It shows general intelligence. And he used factor analysis to discover G. Remember, that's the subtests. And he realized when people did really well on one of the subtests, chances are they're probably going to do well on all the other ones too. He didn't find too many examples of people that like bombed one little subtest, but then scored as genius on the others. And while I disagree with Spearman overall, I can see where he's going with this because every year I have to fail a handful of students. And I hate calling home and being like, hey, your kid is a mistake. And I hate making that call. But I always check all of their other grades before I have to make that call. And gosh darn it, don't you know, I'm never the only one that they fail. Never. They always are failing multiple classes. It's not like they got all A's and an F. You might have A's and like a C or A's and a B or like D's and a C. But like, you're not going to have genius level and like illiterate. You're not going to be that wide of a range. Says Spearman. It's either like you're an average student, you're above average, or you're below average. You're not going to have a mixture of the two. Does anyone disagree with that? Because this guy, according to Spearman, is stupid. This guy, according to Spearman, is below average intelligence. He's autistic. He doesn't speak. He doesn't live by himself. He needs constant care. But he took a 1-hour helicopter ride around Rome. And then he drew it to scale. He drew it to scale. It took him days, but he drew it to scale. They even counted the numbers of windows in the buildings that he drew, and the numbers of the windows were correct. The windows that have little flower pots sitting on the side, he drew those too. He's done it to New York. He's done it with Paris. He's done it with Rome. I feel like he's done it with one other city. Like, he's an autistic savant. A savant is a genius in one level, in one area. That like they have perfect pitch. They can play any music that they've ever heard ever. I actually had a student who was who had perfect pitch. Like they would ask me to like say a sentence, and like the melody of like the sound of my voice, they would play on a piano. Because certain words, like whenever you say the word high, your voice goes up. Whenever we say low, your voice goes down. So they played my sentence back to me. That's amazing. People that have like you've seen those kids in like shows that they're like talk shows, and it's like these kids that are like 5 years old, but they know every single president, and they can tell you every single factoid about every single president, or they're really good at like history battles or something. That's crazy. But like Spearman would say, nope, if they're not good at everything, they're not good at anything. And so that's where Gardner comes in. On Monday, we're going to take a little survey to see which of Howard Gardner's intelligences you are strongest at. He has a whole bunch of, a garden has a whole bunch of flowers or things in the garden, like 8 things, like 8 different types of intelligences. There's spatial intelligence. That's your sculptor. That's your architect. There's linguistic intelligence. That's your that's your author. That is your poet. Mathematical, obviously. We got engineering, science, wizards. Kinesthetic, that's your natural born athlete. That's your prima ballerina. Musical, that's someone with perfect pitch, or they can play 15 instruments. Interpersonal, intrapersonal, they're different. Interpersonal, they're really good with other people. A natural leader, maybe a counselor. Intra, that's more like Gandhi or Freud. They can really see inside themselves. And natural, well, that's your Bear Grylls. I can tell you which plants are poisonous. I can live out in the wilderness forever, Survivor Man style. But Monday we'll take a little survey and see which one we are. I'm 0 on natural. Like I like to go outside and to be with nature. Fire drill, maybe. As I'm walking to my car, sure, why not?
Why would I really leave?
Right. There are bugs out there. Do I have my Flonase nose spray with me? All right.